As I ring the bowl this morning, let us come together in celebration. Celebration of Reverend Sue's ordination 10 years ago and of her 7 years here as our minister. And may we also celebrate this blessed community of promise, hope, and comfort.
Many of you will probably recognize this song. It's seasonal. The autumn leaves drift by the window, the autumn leaves all red and gold. I see your lips, those summer kisses, those sunburned hands I used to hold. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling, when autumn leaves start to fall. C'est une chanson qui nous ressemble, toi qui m'aimais, moi qui t'aimais, nous vivions tous les deux ensemble, moi qui t'aimais, toi qui m'aimais. Mais la vie sépare ceux qui s'aiment tout doucement, sans faire de bruit. Et la mer efface sur la sable les pas des amants désunis.
Thank you, Michael. Well, good morning and welcome to members, friends, and visitors of the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. Although we may not share all the same beliefs, we are an intentional community gathered around our shared promise to support each other's individual spiritual journeys and to inspire, inform, and support all who seek a more equal and just community. I am not Jan Sprinkle. I am Nancy Holland this morning, and joined this morning with Reverend Sue in our pulpit, Michael Casey at the piano, and the staff and volunteers as noted in your order of service who make this and every Sunday possible. We are grateful for you all. And we are glad that all of you are here this morning, being in person or on our Zoom feed. And as we strive to widen our circle and welcome everyone to the table, and that includes our kids who are in RE this morning. Reverend Sue's talk this morning is entitled The Promises We Make, and she will reflect on the ordination vows she took, as well as the broader message for all of us, living into the promises we make. And in celebration this morning at coffee, we will have some cake, so please join us afterwards in the lobby. Announcements: we are in need of a greeter and a coffee host for next week, the 8th, so if you're able to do one of those jobs, please sign up on the whiteboard in the lobby. And now, please join me as we light the chalice. They're new words in your order of service.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Nancy, for pulling this all together. I even requested the cake, so we're good. I invite us all to share in lighting our chalice this morning. When we light our chalice, everyone focuses on the flame, yet it is the paraffin of the candle, the cotton of the wick, the potassium chlorate of the sulfur of the match, and the oxygen in the air around us that makes the flame possible. As leaders, we are not called to be a lone beacon on a hill. Rather, we are meant to work together so that we might together shine. Thank you, Nancy. Our opening hymn is Love Will Guide Us. We invite you to rise in body or spirit for hymn number 131 in your gray hymnal. So one of the things I've gotten to do over 10 years of being a minister, and a little bit ahead of time, you do a few ahead of time, is to do weddings. Weddings are one time we think about vows and commitments, but I never get to do the reading from the weddings. And recently at a wedding, this reading was used. It's a very common one. It's called Excerpt from Gift of the Sea by Anne Maru Lindbergh. And you've heard it, and I'm going to modify it slightly, figure out what the copyright folks say later, because it really is striking me as we think this morning about promises and the fluidity, the ways things change. So here's our reading. When you love someone or something or a place or an institution, you do not love them all the time in exactly the same way from moment to moment. It is an impossibility. It is even a lie to pretend to, and yet this is exactly what most of us demand. We have so little faith in the ebb and flow of life and love and relationships. We leap at the flow of the tide and then resist the terror of its ebb. We are afraid it will never return. We insist on permanency, on duration, on continuity, when the only continuity possible in life as in love is in growth, in that fluidity, in freedom, in the sense that we are dancers, are free, barely touching as they pass, but partners in the same pattern. The only real security is not in owning it or possessing it, not in demanding or expecting it, not in hoping even. Security in relationship lies neither in looking back for what it was in nostalgia, nor forward to what it might be in dread or anticipation, but living in present relationship and accepting as it is now. For our meditation today, sort of following that and following what I hope it is we come to do each week, which is to think a bit about kindness. Nancy and I invite you into a sung meditation today. We're going to go to 1031 in your blue hymnal. We want to acknowledge there are 3 verses. And if there's a lack of hymnals somewhere, we can spread them out. I'm seeing a little stress. There's some in the front, some on the floor. They're sort of like my life. It's like my car. They're everywhere. Everybody have a blue hymnal. Check under your chair. There might be one there. Great. We've moved the chairs around, and that means moving hymnals. So Nancy will now cue us in as to where to start as we enter a time of reflection, a time of consideration, of commitments, and an invitation to be in the present moment today. Take a moment, quiet, peace. May it be so. This is the time in our service that we reserve for sharing our joys and our concerns. So if anyone would like to come up and light a candle this morning and share your thoughts, please come forward. As usual, we'll light the first candle
for all the trials in our world today, all those who are suffering from war, natural disasters, floods, famines, discord.
Thank you. I have a friend of mine that's having an operation tomorrow. She has cancer, and I don't know exactly what the outcome's going to be, but if everybody could just say a little prayer for her, light a candle, and hopefully things work out for her. So that's all. Thank you.
It's Sunday service. I'm always so thankful for the challenges and the blessings of this community, Reverend Sue being one. We go along, with each other. It's always a new beginning, and we certainly celebrate Sue being with us this morning.
Hello. Oh, we'll wait our turn.
I don't have any official news on Kevin Bryan's situation, but I heard a rumor that he was operated on, and he actually was seen on his feet in the hall, so I assume he's making progress, and we wish him well.
And Kevin is in a rehab facility up in Middletown for a period of time, but he's doing well.
Can I say something?
Yes.
This is Diane, and I'm here with Kevin in his room in Middletown, Delaware. So we just wanted to say that he's managing well. He's been up on his feet quite a bit, and we just want to thank everybody who's been so gracious and helpful through this week and beyond.
Thank you all so much for your support. It's really, really important, and I just love our members.
It was great to hear your voice, Kevin, and we're all thinking of you. Yeah.
You wave to the camera, I think.
Oh, we could all wave. Hi.
Wave back if you can hear.
I think
All right, now you can all.
Oh, okay. Any other joys or concerns this morning? Well, for those joys or concerns that we may still be holding in our hearts, let us take a moment of silent meditation. Blessed be. And now we will take an offering to support the mission and programs of this beloved community. Please be as generous as you can.
This is a piano arrangement of the aria O mio babbino caro from the opera Gianni Schicchi.
for these gifts given in generosity. We are truly grateful. Thank you. And now, as a reading, yes, by David Blanchard that seemed to fit well with our service today. And he says, "Do more than simply keep the promises made in your vow. Do something more. Keep promising. As time passes, keep promising new things, deeper things, vaster things, yet unimagined things. Promises that will be needed to fill the expanse of time and of love. Keep promising." And now, Reverend Sue.
The papers we have straight there. So I don't know about you, but when childhood, I was told, don't break promises. And there are just so many promises. I recall pinky swears. I don't know if that was something the girls' clubs are doing or not. And these were allegiances to some backyard clubs that we somehow cooked up. There were the Boy Scout oath, the Girl Scout oath. One of my sons in college opted to pledge a fraternity. My other son is in the United States Public Health Service, which is military adjacent, and he had to take an oath of service similar to what our president takes. So we make those promises, and then we make promises to ourselves and others to do better. We even tell the hygienist, yes, I'll floss. It's an implied promise. But there are also those legal promises we make to pay a mortgage, to honor the rules of a homeowner association, or to serve on a jury and satisfy the laws of our country. And promises, as I've thought about this wide range of them, are about behavior. A promise is saying, yes, trust me. I won't let you or the institution down. I take my commitment seriously. You have my word, or the country or the institution has my word. And then we take another step sometimes when we're at weddings or we're at ordinations or inaugurations. I lost my place there. Where you're at the inauguration, you're watching all the pomp, the ceremony. I've gone to a few, and it's just amazing. And so for weddings, inaugurations, and ordinations, we go a step further and we make our promises before witnesses. Hopefully we are ready before we commit. Hopefully we understand what we're committing to, and ideally what we've considered, what is it going to take to stay true to the commitment? Frankly, that flossing one isn't that hard. You just have to do it, but yet somehow things get in the way. There's always trade-offs. Virtually always when we make a commitment, there's some other sort of a trade-off. Times it's even in the level of a sacrifice. And there's some weight and there's some responsibility. There's so much potential in the commitments that open doors. You'll experience joy. There'll be a greater sense to purpose in your life when you're in some sort of a committed scenario. But commitments can also come with the reality that they may end up with disappointment and pain, because promises are not all forever. In a world that's impossible to predict, the path to commitment needs to go beyond our head and wrap our heart around it to be someplace in that intuitive space. There's just too much unknown, too many ways would have to align, that if we're figuring it out all the time, it's unlikely to quite come to fruition. I did have an opportunity. I don't do that many weddings for members, but in Easton, it was a member's daughter. I had a chance to officiate at the wedding last Friday night as we anticipated the storm coming in, and we did all the things that you do on a windy, wet weekend on the Eastern Shore. So I was officiating. It was a pretty traditional service, and including the vows, which I'm going to read a bit from, were traditional. So I asked each partner if they had come freely and without reservation. That is often part of making a commitment, that you don't feel coerced. Because when commitments are coerced, there's something often broken. I then asked the couple if they would love faithfully one another. We use the traditional, as long as you both shall live words. It's a couple picture in their late 20s, and it was beautiful. And then the current tradition, almost every wedding I've been to, the bride and groom write their own vows. What is it they are actually going to promise? And I'm not going to read their entire vows, but I offer you a sentence. One of them offered, "I will walk with you to explore new adventures, celebrate life's joys, and navigate challenges with strength and resilience." The other partner, and they hadn't seen each other's vows, that's part of the drama in today's weddings, is, "I promise to keep building a life with you, to give you my all on the hard days, to celebrate even harder on the great days, and to always be your biggest supporter." What strikes me in the vows that they wrote, the promises they made last Friday, was the curiosity, that sense of we're going to enter vows and keep on keeping on. There was an honesty that, as Nancy talked about, promises are a beginning. They don't define what will be. And when you make big promises, rarely is the commitment going to be perfect. You're going to miss the mark. It's presumed when we make a commitment that we will be surprised, blindsided, and just plain screw up. We promise to stay at the table, to take our obligations seriously, and to be ready to change. Where are promises and commitments sprinkled in your life? They may not be in all the obvious places. Where are promises and commitments sprinkled in your life? How have they served you as guideposts? Could be your membership in this congregation. It could be something that you quietly promised you'd do yourself and you've stayed true to that, or screwed up now and then and gotten back on a path. Are there places that you've made promises and they maybe have narrowed your life in an unhelpful way? Have your promises been a source of strength? And which are the commitments that feel really meaningful for you today? These past few weeks, I've thought a lot about promises and commitments. I was ordained 10 years ago on Friday. For those on Facebook, I post about once every 2 years. And it was lovely to hear from so many who had been there and to hear encouragement. I think you sometimes need that encouragement, and it felt good to post this week. And hopefully I put also a sermon I had written 10 years ago and some pictures in the newsletter here. So one of the questions I was asked, I found it, if anybody's curious actually how ordinations go, I found my own copy of the program. But one of the things I was asked is, quote, "Among us and wherever you may be called to serve, we would have you preach without fear or favor the word of truth in freedom and in love, ministering alike to all the principles of our faith. Are you ready to assume the privileges and responsibilities of ordained persons in ordained ministry and minister to persons in their joys and sorrows, setting forth no less an example by your behavior?" What's interesting when I look back on this, and I had to dig this out, is I was not called to walk on water or live in a bubble. I was being asked, are you ready? Where in your life have you been asked, are you ready, before you make a commitment? Were you ready for that? And then there were the words of affirmation, the actual ordination. In our tradition, it is the members of a congregation who do the act of ordination, and the members of the congregation, those who had signed the book, all rose, and they said this, we, the members of the congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, recognize and affirm your calling in the ministry of our faith. By these words and with the authority of our common spirit and heritage, we ordain you, Susan Carlson Browning, in the Unitarian Universalist ministry. Here's the thing that I hadn't remembered. The congregation then gave me a promise. They said this: we give you our blessing and pledge ourselves to walk with you in unity, in the bond of peace, and in ways of truth and love. I was not doing it alone. We were having a conversation in a very formal setting. And then they gave me direction. It's called a charge. They told me what I'm supposed to do. And when I've thought about it, they were the members of Arlington, and other than maybe one person in this room who is also a member of the church in Arlington, go David Beeler, there was direction to me, which I assume each congregation that I serve now owns this, giving me some direction. We charge you to connect with the Spirit in an authentic relationship, to sow and to grow seeds of justice and gladness, to serve with compassion and wisdom, and to live mindfully and hopefully, celebrating the wonder and mystery of all creation. And I'm almost done reading through the parts, but I want you to hear what I then said. I said this: with joy and gratitude, mindful of the privileges and responsibilities, I humbly accept the ministry to which you ordain me. In your presence and before God, the Spirit of life we call by many names, I dedicate myself to the values, traditions, and principles of our religious faith. I pledge myself to walk beside you honorably, to foster a sense of wonder and mystery for all that exists, and to act courageously in our mutual quest for truth, peace, and justice. So I had written those words, the words that are in this order of service, with leaders in the congregation, and they were tweaked just like wedding vows are to meet the common needs we had, but pretty much I was saying what ministers for hundreds of years have said when they're ordained, and frankly, it's not a lot different across the traditions. If you had asked me before I'm so proud of myself that I actually found this, before I dug that out, what is it I remembered from the words? I likely would have told you that I remembered I was supposed to preach truth and treat everyone with loves. Those were parts of the ritual, but I had forgotten how mutual it was, because we don't do commitments alone. We found a path. I would have remembered the bars set, but not those words encouraging me to foster a sense of wonder and mystery. So I encourage us all, wherever those commitments are that you were thinking about, to revisit the promises. They may actually be different. They may or may not be written down, but than what you remember. They had way more flexibility in the commitment I made than I had recalled. So it's been 10 years. So I'm going to do a little reflection here. A couple thoughts. One is, it strikes me how much circumstances define how we live into our promises. I don't think the right questions for me today is, did I break my vows? We'll go with yes. Have I been faithful? Or even how I'm doing? I don't think those are the right questions. Anne Lindbergh in her reading reminds us that we insist on permanency, on duration, on continuity, when the only continuity is life in love, in growth and fluidity. Maybe the more helpful questions for me, and these might help you as you think about promises: how has ministry, how have these promises shaped me? How have the promises that were made been a part of my work and my journey? And what still speak to me today? Well, first we get some data, because I'm a data geek. By my count, I've written about 300 sermons. I've probably preached 400 times. So that's the two congregation thing. You get to preach the same sermon multiple times. Easton will hear this next week. I've attended about 200 board meetings. That's the other part of serving two congregations, is you get to go to 2 per month. You submit a minister's report each time. And in 10 years, I've managed to lead 16 Christmas Eve services. Go Eve of the Eve, who would have guessed? So on preaching, on choosing topics and figuring out what to say and how to say it, it still takes a lot of time, and it still involves worry, or something pretty similar to worry. Pretty much each Sunday, there is an am I ready question. Is this worthy or worthwhile of your time? Am I connecting? There are often tweaks to a sermon at sunrise. It's just hard to wing it. And then when you get to preach, it is a joy. I've preached on Me Too, on racism, on loving our enemy. We've considered truth and trust, joy and creativity. I think those are just some of the ones I've done with Nancy. Forgiveness and sadness. And somehow I came up with another 290 topics. But I think they all sort of circle back to this. How can we be loving people? How can we express love, live love, and accept love? Because commitments have some sense of mutuality. I do think there are times I held back and I do hold back, unsure of whether the congregation is ready for something, or if I'm clear enough in my own head about it. Because preaching is an ongoing conversation, and it's done in relationship. And I do wonder, am I called to be more courageous, more direct? Risk-taking is challenging because you don't know how things are going to be heard. That's not just true in ministry. Think back to those commitments you've made. It also strikes me that I've done absolutely nothing in 10 years of ministry alone, or at least not alone for too long. From the service leaders to the musicians to RE, budgets, social justice, and boards, it has been shared ministry. And when I am doing it alone, at times it's because I might need some time of prayer and centering. That would be the excuse. But it's more likely that I was afraid to reach out, to bother you, to not worry about what was ours to worry about together. That can be awkward. It can be fun. But think of the times that we go something on our own because we don't want to bother someone. I didn't expect to be part of small congregational life for a decade, and I absolutely never had considered 2 congregations for a long period of time. There were choices along the way, places I've gotten to make those things, Pat Bjorky and I having really long conversations, and I was privileged to not be forced into any choices. I took them on with love, and I still love doing that work. In small church, there is both simplicity and there are limitations. But here's the thing about promises. Whether it's small church, all the different things I hope you're thinking about, here's the thing on promises. We make them say at ordination, and then just for sport, we take them through a buzzsaw. Okay, John Ramsey, I was thinking of you there. We take the promises through a buzzsaw or some tool or something, a zip line. What are all the different things we could do to shake up our lives? Just to see how our promises stand up. And yes, pandemic ministry is coming to mind. If anyone had asked me to live out my ordination by preaching into a camera, it would have been a hard no. I don't do videos. I don't like to be photographed. I have no theater aspects whatsoever. And with just a moment of discernment, it would be that is not happening yet. What I recall is a sense of panic in the local and the broader community and in the world. If ministry, and it wasn't a generic thing, it was my ministry at that point, wherever needed to address isolation, fear, and death, here we were. I had a daughter who was working as a nurse practitioner in the ICU in New York City treating COVID patients. I had all the other stresses we all do. And I just looked in the mirror, I remember saying, don't hesitate, just step in. It's what you were called to do, just do it. And the it was the services, but it was the letters to the congregation, the closing of buildings, and the many calls. And I was directive. You guys can put your own words on it. It's okay to say bossy. It was sort of how I thought I needed to live ministry out at that time, and we worked on tech. We found and signed up for YouTube channels. You guys, particularly on the tech team, met people in Easton. We met my friend Greg in North Carolina, who was happening. We were talking, and it was wee hours of the AM. YouTube channels, drop boxes, and more. So there was nightmare one of the pandemic. I also picked topics and wrote sermons I was way too tired to write because somehow I was squeezing in that. So it was nightmare two. And then I preached them to my husband, who was not always the willing camera person I'd hoped for, and a dog, or eventually came into an empty church. Preaching to no one was nightmare three. And we can still watch all of those sermons online today. We've never pulled them down. It was a time where I needed to remind myself over and over, don't do this alone. And you all joined in. You recorded yourself, you figured out readings, you ran tech, you did visits to people who had dying spouses. I remember Vita saying, I've gone over to see Bill Lindsay. I just stood outside because I can't go in after Alice died. People stepped up and church kept happening. So I often wonder when they say preach without fear or favor, of course I worry, of course I live in fear, but maybe that was the part of the promise. We live things and we do things we don't expect. We don't even know what is needed. And around promises, I remind us we need humor. I am realizing the time, I think it was my second time here, I think people were slightly horrified. Somebody said, well, it's Harry Potter week. And I said, why not dress up? And I preached a sermon in costume your second week here. A few people told me that was different. I remember my husband swearing on live Zoom during a Christmas Eve service. It was legit tech stress, but it was pretty direct. We had to remind him that he was upstairs, I was downstairs. Everybody can hear that. Take a deep breath. And there was the time I recently in this congregation said to you, that was a terrible start to singing that hymn. Could we just start over? It was just really bad. But I've also thought about the more serious challenge. I think about not only sometimes how we hold back on commitments, but I think that there's something in the times today, and I don't know if it's really changed that much, where people fear making commitments. People particularly fear making commitments to a group. It's not that I see being involved in 10 different groups and spreading yourself thin and going full throttle is healthy. I don't think that happens, but I think groups are pulling us in many directions, family, school, and more. But I think sometimes we resist them all. We are so afraid of commitment. We live in the resisting place. It's not even the number of commitments, but we are a little afraid of going deep. We're afraid of taking those risks. We think it out sometimes maybe a little too much. I think we worry when we're thinking about making a commitment that it won't be just right. I can tell you now, it won't be. If you're going to make a commitment, it will not be just right. We worry that others are not going to do their share. Okay, I'll tell you that. They likely won't. Pretty clear. And then when we make a commitment, will mean that we're going to have to do something less of something else. And that's true. There are trade-offs. I see many standing at the edges today. They stand there reluctant of the commitment, but wanting it at the same time. I think we're often lonely. We struggle without community. And I wonder, is there a role in ministry to invite people in differently, to help them with those promises, and to see the possibility that might come with deeper commitment? What's mine to do? What's ours to do? Because I do think that ministry has come to change. Our faith is changing. We are learning to center something they talk of as collective liberation. It's not just our spiritual journeys. If we're going to help those on the margins, who are the people whose voices are not heard, and how do we free us all together by working on deep challenges? It's likely change coming to our principles. Today's a reminder that promises I made 10 years ago were never intended to be frozen in time or to keep me on the straight and narrow. In the reading Nancy did, we're reminded to do more, to keep promising and to keep promising new things, deeper things, vaster things, yet unimagined things. And I think that also means letting go, because you can't live into it all. I was charged to live into authentic relationship, to sow seeds of justice and gladness. In that paragraph, today I hear some lightness of the world. In a world that in 10 years has seen political rupture, a greater sense of climate risk, a pandemic, and struggles for churches to survive, where might this charge guide me? Where might it guide us? Where might promises for you guide you? What might you be thinking about today? It was 13 years ago that I sat in a coffee shop with a minister who had been listening to me for many years. At some point, if folks who might have read the sermon I posted on the newsletter can see this, at some point in that coffee shop, I'd been in seminary for 2 years. That day, I stopped resisting commitment to ordination and brought my imperfect self to the imperfect path of sharing our faith as your ordained minister. 10 years ago, I made that commitment before witnesses. I wasn't expecting to cry though. And I think for me, it has been really good to reconnect with the commitments I made and to imagine the past possibilities that are yet to come. I still feel blessed. I still feel incredibly humbled. And I thank you for being a part of this journey. I thank you for considering what it means to walk with me and to walk in our faith. May it be so, and blessed be. And I'm going to let Nancy decide how we're going to close all this out. Got a few minutes left. Yeah. So, thank you. I probably buried your paperwork. Thank you.
Sue and I were laughing before because we were talking about putting this service together, and she said, we need times to celebrate and have fun, so let's have cake. And, just put a chalice on it or something, nothing too fussy. So I said, I'm on it. So that's like a promise, right? Yeah. So I called this custom bakery that we have used in the past, and they didn't call me back, and they didn't call me back, and I sent emails and texts and everything. They didn't call me back, and finally they called me back, and they said, "Oh, we're so sorry. We just got your whatever, but we can't do it." So this was Friday, so I said, "Okay." So Plan B is like the Acme grocery store, yeah. So and I find the chalice, a really bright, flaming chalice, and I take the picture down to have it printed on the cake. And I pick it up this morning, and the woman says to me, "My machine went kaflooey, and so the colors aren't right, and I'm not going to charge you." So we're going to have a cake. It does have a chalice, but it's very pastel-y. So it was just one of those things. We got there, but not quite the way we expected. So we have just a few minutes for discussion if anybody would like to make a comment or question on living into our promises. Mr. Buzzsaw here.
Yeah, obviously I had to think. I was thinking about that. Those days when you put all the pieces together, and I've often talked to many people in the congregation and how thankful we have been to have you take the helm and be bossy and keep it together. Keep it together. One thing, when Marcy and I did our vows, we did pretty much the traditional, love, honor. But when it came to obey, we changed that to humor. So.
Words matter. We have thoughts on promises or commitments.
Well, I'm pretty interested in that moment when, right before you make the commitment, when you're not really sure and there's a lot of indecision, but something pushes you over the edge. I think usually in my case, it's been need. I've seen a need, so I jump in. But that seems like a very important point.
Anyone else? Yep.
We had a friend who was, he'd gone to the Naval Academy and he was a pilot and was in the reserves his whole life. And he was about to become the reserve commanding officer at Patuxent Naval Air Station. And we were invited to the, I forget what they call the ceremony, where the charge or whatever, where they change commanders, right? It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. I mean, they flew in the Navy band, a huge airplane lands, and this band comes out, and they've got the Marines in their white pants and the swords, and I mean, it was this huge thing with hundreds of people there. And afterwards, I said to Billy, our friend, I says, why all that? And he says, well, you know, it started back when ships had sails. And when the captain changed, he wanted the crew to know that this was right, that there's a new person in charge now. So, and it hit me how important it is to have witnesses like you talked about to those kinds of special events, and making the oath in front of other people and making the commitment to it. Anyway, just what I thought of.
It's interesting, I've been to some military retirements as well, and that handing off, I also got to do the prayers when one of the, she was a congregant at the time, took her oath of office to be a judge down in Talbot County, and how similar it was to all those things that I had gone through at ordination. It was her investiture and all the, similar to, I don't know if folks saw some of the pictures I posted, but about 25 of my colleagues were physically there, and there's a marching in. And it does have a little odd feel, but it's also over time become a trusted feel. But yeah, and retirement is a place of letting go of some of the roles. Somebody else out there.
I want to add to what John said. I remember during the COVID crisis when you took charge and kept us going, kept us together. And I often wonder if we would have made it if it hadn't been for you. So our thanks.
Well, I was thinking about commitment, and I was thinking about, as Unitarians, what commitment do we have? And we have a special commitment, I think, to find the truth and to act humanely. And I think that's a principle we should always hold.
Harry, it was like a straight person there. One of the things that's changed in our faith is there's so little discussion about what people believe. You go to conferences, you can seek something out about what people believe, but there is one of the books, and I've talked about it a couple times, it's called Unlocking the Power of Covenant. What we do have, it goes back to the town hall meetings of the Puritans in the different places, is a commitment to walk together and to understand how messy that is and to draw the circle wide. It's not this group walking together, though this group needs to. But when we always talk about walking wide, and I think to the work that we did through the strategic plan and with Phil Dutton and different folks, where we're saying whose stories aren't being heard, who is not there, and how hard is it to walk in community. So the theology that holds us together is the difficulty of staying in relationships. Where do you need flexibility? And where do you need to stay tight and strong? And that has become, over the last 10 years, a common theology. And what you're going to hear more and more, and I'll close this out with this, is that theology only works if there's something we're all pulling toward. And that's why you're hearing so many sermons and so many different things about centering love, about accepting love, about giving love, about living into the beloved community, which is the whole world. Because Unitarians said, hey, we need something. We can't just all be spokes if there's not something centered. But it's not as much belief. It's commitment to staying in relationship even when it gets hard and messy, and that doesn't mean everybody loves each other all the time. But I think that's been some of my learning over the years. So I ask us now to do our final hymn, and what we picked is the same hymn that was sung at the closing of my ordination. And it is fast, and you're going to keep up with Michael. He's showed me how that he's played it, and it's The Fire of Commitment. And it's 3 verses, and we'll go through it together. 1028 in this hymnal. Philip, help us out. Thanks. We will have our closing words, which is actually the benediction I wrote, which is the only part you do at your ordination. And we will move into extinguishing the chalice. Nancy will help us out by extinguishing the chalice and then sing our benediction. It's interesting, the benediction started by having people take the hand of our neighbor, something we don't do in COVID anymore. So we will skip that step. What I said, I offer my thanks for the care and trust you have in my ministry. Thank you for the blessing of ordination. Let us leave this gathering in a spirit of gratitude for all that has been shared. Let us leave grateful for this community. Let us carry the sense of connection and hope felt this afternoon into the world. Go in peace. Go in love. Go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go. We can now extinguish our chalice together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
This is the second movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata.
join us for coffee and cake.